All right, well, welcome to Archiving the Arts, music, theater, and dance on the library's digital shelves here at the National Book Festival's Library of Congress Pavilion. I am a senior digital collection specialist for web archiving at the Library of Congress, and I first joined the library in 2018 in the music division. And in both jobs, I've been asked the same question: what's your favorite item in the collections? And my answer is always the same. It's the web archives, because they bring together my favorite things: digital curation, archival theory, and access to born digital cultural heritage. So what is web archiving? Web archiving is the process of collecting portions of the World Wide Web, preserving those collections in an archival format, and then serving the archives for access and use. So how did web archiving begin at the Library of Congress? The Library of Congress web archiving program started in 2000, so we're preparing to celebrate our 25th anniversary this year. And web archiving started as a small pilot program to archive the 2000 presidential election. And you can see an example of what the library's website looked like back then on this slide, and you can use the QR code to explore it further. According to this March 1st, 2000 capture, which is the copy of the website at the time, the library was celebrating its bicentennial. And now here we are, 1 year away from America 250. The following year, the September 11th attacks happened, and suddenly there was a lot of material online about the terrorist attacks, and the library, with some external partners, quickly ramped up its web archiving efforts to try to preserve as much as it could, like the memorial site you see on this slide. Web archiving was still really new back then, so there was a lot to learn. But the experience laid the groundwork for moving beyond the pilot phase into the more established, expanded program that we have now. A question we often get is, how big is the library's web archive? Well, it is huge, with over 5.6 petabytes, that is larger than terabytes, petabytes of data. The library's web archiving program has grown considerably since 2000 and continues to grow every year. This data represents online content published in 137 languages and 218 countries. These languages and countries span 195 total web archive collections, 83 of which are considered active because they're still growing. We're currently crawling, meaning copying with web archiving technology, over 16,000 seed URLs, entire websites, specific pages within websites, and individual PDF files published on the web. So you're probably wondering, what's in all that data in the Library of Congress web archives? We have two main branches of collecting: comprehensive collecting and representative collecting. The comprehensive collecting means our core documentation responsibilities, which include legislative branch agency websites, congressional member and committee sites, and U.S. national election campaign sites. Our representative collections encompass event-based collections, which are time-bound, like the World War I Centennial Web Archive, and thematic collections, which support subject areas used by U.S. Congress, researchers, and the public, like webcomics Web Archive. So where do the performing arts, that is music, theater, and dance, fit in to all of this? Well, I'll start with what scholars of web history say about the topic more broadly. For a researcher in the 22nd century, it will seem unimaginable that someone studying the 21st century would do anything but draw heavily on the online world to tell them about people's changing lives. So what does that look like for the performing arts? Well, to understand the content, we need to first understand its creators. Performing arts creators range from individual composers, dancers, choreographers, playwrights, lyricists, instrumentalists and vocalists, conductors, set designers, costume designers, lighting designers, stage directors, producers. Are any of those folks here right now? Yes! All right. And there are also organizations like unions, advocacy organizations, theater companies, dance companies, musical ensembles, performance venues, manufacturers, and publishers. These are all also creators. Their web-based documentation includes press kits, concert calendars, artist statements, reviews, and works lists, just to name a few. Now, lastly, artists and organizations have only archived this content on a website and often nowhere else. Now, that's just online access. That's not digital preservation, and that is where web archiving comes in. So the beauty and preservation challenge of the web is that updates are instantaneous. Changes over time make our world, including the art that we produce in it, ephemeral. It doesn't last forever. So with that in mind, let's reframe the quote from earlier. Is online evidence of the performing arts part of our changing lives? So let's dig into this question together with some collection spotlights. Here are the 3 Web Archive collections of the Music Division, all of which are thematic within the representative collecting area. The Performing Arts Web Archive began in 2011, and since 2018, the collection contains websites that share creators with Music Division special collections and rare materials. For example, the Music Division is the repository for the Jerry Mulligan collection. Any saxophone players? Saxophone lovers, jazz lovers, yes, thank you. So this web archive currently has 150 web archives available online, like Jerry Mulligan's official website. Back when I worked for the Music Division, I created the LC Commission Composers Web Archive in 2018 to preserve websites of composers commissioned for new works with Music Division funds, as well as websites of foundations, institutes, museums, and awards established in memory of commissioned composers who are deceased. So an example is the website of Chicago-based living composer Augusta Reed Thomas, who received Koussevitzky Music Foundation and Kindler Foundation Trust commissions. This is one of 287 web archives available online in this collection. And back when I worked for the Music Division in 2019, I created the Professional Organizations for Performing Arts Web Archive to document the range of performing arts specialties and activities, exemplified by unions and trade guilds and professional membership organizations. An example is the official website of the American Alliance for Theater and Education. This collection has 423 items available online. Performing arts websites, web pages, and online documents are also found within the interdisciplinary collections outside the Music Division. From 2020 to 2023, I was one of several staff members who contributed to an event-based collection, the library's Coronavirus Web Archive. This collection has 518 items available online, and 170 of those document the impact of the pandemic on the performing arts. Since 2021, there are open access and openly available online music journals in the openly available online serials web archive. These include scholarship on music theory, hip hop, music therapy, and more. So one reason to use Web Archive to document the performing arts is because where we look for information has changed over time. How do you know when and where your favorite ensemble is going to perform? Something we may take for granted in the 21st century is online calendars. Let's say you wanted to see your favorite musical on tour here in DC. You'd likely go to the website of a venue, like the National Theater, to find out when the shows are happening and buy your tickets online. But before the internet, this Washington Times newspaper clipping from October 31st, 1920, was where DC area residents read about the upcoming week's performances at the National Theater. And I got this clipping from Chronicling America. So what shifts and changes are represented in the Library of Congress web archives, like our changes in calendars? Let's take a look. The website of Pulitzer Prize-winning composer Jennifer Higdon is in the LC Commission Composers Web Archive because she's received commissions from the Koussevitzky Music Foundation and Da Capo Fund. This capture from May 13th, 2021, includes a page that lists upcoming performances of the composer's music, including the dates, times, venues, and performers. It stops at February 2022. The live web, if you go to her website right now, starts at March 1st, 2025 and goes into 2026. Therefore, captures of her online calendar in the web archives would be essential to researchers of the composer, especially ones interested in performance history of specific works. The website of DC-born composer Geoffrey Mumford is also in the LC Commission Composers Web Archive because he received commissions from the McKim Fund and the Dina Costin and Roger Shapiro Fund for New Music. This capture on the left from February 5th, 2020 is quite different from the screenshot of the live web on the right. At first glance, it looks like the design is all that's different, but look closer and you'll see that 2020's homepage is where season highlights and performances are, whereas the live website has a whole new part of the directory, season highlights. That means the very underlying structure of the website has changed in addition to the information within it. Also, this 2020 capture contains the 2018-19 highlights, but the list on the live web only goes back to 2020. You need both to get the full picture of the composer's impact. You may have noticed that both Jennifer Higdon and Geoffrey Mumford are composers alive and creating today, but most performing arts creators predate the internet. And yet they have online presences through websites for memorial foundations, estates, and scholarly organizations. That means web archives can also preserve the acts and products of online memory. An example in the Performing Arts Web Archive is the website for the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation. I need my jazz fans. Where are you? We all love the First Lady of Song. She created and funded the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation in 1993 to give grants for music and reading initiatives. This website's in the Performing Arts Web Archive because the music division holds the Ella Fitzgerald collection, which chiefly consists of musical arrangements made for her by more than 50 arrangers and orchestrators. The Fitzgerald website is active with ongoing updates, so we're still crawling it. There are also deceased creators whose websites remain live. Take, for instance, the website of American composer Charles Warrenin. You may know him for the opera Brokeback Mountain. His website is in the Performing Arts Web Archive because the music division holds the Charles Warrenin papers. The capture on the left from February 10th, 2019 has the composer's name at the top of the homepage, as well as a news item about a recent performance. The capture on the right is the next one in our crawl calendar from May 6, 2020, and it indicates that the composer passed away with his birth and death dates underneath his name. The latest news item links to a press release about the composer's death. Web archiving then documents changes in content that reflect the real lives of performing arts creators. Online calendars aren't the only parts of performing arts websites to change over time. Names of organizations and their missions, board members, online publications, meeting minutes, you name it. They do too. The Professional Organizations for Performing Arts Web Archive is full of these changes. Here's an example of a change that you might miss if you blink. The American Theater Critics Association, which was founded in 1974, changed its name in January 2024 to the American Theater Critics Journalists Association. One word difference in the title. But this small change reflects a deeper undercurrent, in the organization's words, to embrace the changing world of theater journalism. Web archive users can thereby have a rich experience finding out about the changing nature of the occupation. Who does this work? In which publications? For how long? And for what kind of job security? How can web archiving document contemporary music itself? PDF scores aren't exactly new, but especially since the pandemic, many composers upload free PDF scores or perusal copies to their website. And depending on their style, there may not be a notated score at all. For example, the Coronavirus Web Archive represents a moment in time. In contemporary music, that moment included online-only participatory music making, like Ash Fear's Interior Listening Protocol 1. She composed the piece and released the video for this interactive work on her website in 2021, including an extensive narrative about its inspiration. You can't get the work from a sheet music distributor, and you need the video on her website. Here's another example of evolving formats, theatrical play scripts. During the pandemic, a consortium of American theaters pooled funds to support playwrights and named itself Play at Home. The result was hundreds of free downloadable PDFs of scripts that could be performed with a minimum of one person in isolation in a pod or over video chat. One of the plays available on the Play at Home website in this capture in 2022 was Pets Need Privacy Too by Madeline Sayette, commissioned by State Theater, New Jersey. Playathome.org is no longer live. If you go there, it redirects to a gambling website. But we have captures in the Coronavirus Web Archive. And this play isn't listed on Sayette's website in her list of works. So because web archiving aims to preserve functionality, not just information, the download buttons work. So you can read the scripts as if the website is still live. So this PDF and web archive is proof that she did indeed create this work, and you can help keep it in performance practice. So you may be asking yourself, how can I possibly remember all these cool web archiving collections? How can I revisit the content? That is what this online research guide is for, Performing Arts Web Archives at the Library of Congress. The first major section includes the Music Division Web Archive collections that I started with. And there's a summary of contents. You can learn more and read blog posts. And there are also sample research questions, which invite your curiosity about use cases for the content, whether you're a first-time visitor or an expert data wrangler. The next section of the guide covers interdisciplinary web archive collections, like the Coronavirus Web Archive you see here. And the More Resources section of the guide is a sample of blogs and web archive collections, mostly outside of the Library of Congress, for you to feed your new and growing web archives curiosity. And these include resources that our staff use frequently to stay up to date in the field. So I hope I've gotten you all thinking about how technology like web archiving can help preserve the online evidence of performing arts creativity over time. Individuals and organizations comprise the performing arts field, and moments in time that they respond to quickly become history. And no website lasts forever, just as Grumpy Cat here has discovered with the 404 error message in her browser. So the Library of Congress aims to use the best archival standards available to us to preserve the online content our staff identify and make it available to you. You can visit the Web Archiving Section's festival table right over here in the James Madison section. It's shared with By the People. Please say hi, pick up our awesome swag, and thanks so much for your attention this morning. Please stay in touch with the Web Archiving program. I'd love to hear questions if anybody has any. Woo.
Hi, that was wonderful. I already learned so much. Love libraries. My question is, does web archival include social media, knowing you can access it through the web?
The library's collection development policy excludes social media for lots of reasons, most of which are technical. There are web archives that exist out in the world that do archive social media. There are lots of different types of archival crawlers, some of which are browser-based, some of which are run from the command line, the back end of your computer. And different types of technology can do that. Different national libraries around the world are peer institutions. Some of them have different policies related to copyright. Some of them have different policies related to use of the technology and permissions. But at the Library of Congress, we do not archive social media.
Hi, thank you so much for that talk. It was really, really good. I'm curious, like a bit on the technical side. I have a background in computer science, and I'm curious how much you guys think about like information security, how much you guys are thinking about if you're pulling like bugs off of the websites you're thinking about, and I'm Oh, I'm sorry, can you not hear me? Do I need to repeat my question?
Yeah.
I'm curious about like information security and how much you guys think about that. Do you guys think about like any bugs or malware you're pulling off of the websites, and how much do you think about information security for the information you're storing in the websites and things?
That's a really great question. I'm going to summarize it real quick. So that question was about information security and whether or not we can archive like the viruses or anything or any malware that's in a website, right?
Thinking about like, does that ever happen? Do you ever
Oh. Not that I know of. I haven't heard about that. Our Office of the Chief Information Officer, they're amazing. We have really, really robust security protocols for our technology at the library. The way a web crawler works, if you imagine it like a spider, it's crawling the code that makes up a website, and it's copying it and copying it. And we have to give that spider instructions to say, start here, start at loc.gov. And only do loc.gov. If we link out to another organization, we can give it instructions to say, do not leave loc.gov. We get all these pages in it. Or you can be very specific with a crawler and say, only do this one PDF file. So as far as the malware, I have had no experience with that. But we have government security in our technology.
Hi, thank you so much for that great talk. I probably partially answered by the social media question, but since we are currently in an era where there's a lot of new and different sorts of emerging art forms on the internet, I'm thinking in terms of like streams and stuff like that. Are there any plans currently at the Library of Congress for how you would go about archiving a medium like that?
So streaming content like Spotify, YouTube, or anything else like that is streaming rather than uploaded as a file to a website is really difficult to capture with current web archiving tools across the board. Selection decisions about what gets included in these web archive collections is left to subject experts at the library. So back when I was in the music division, I was one of the subject experts that made those decisions based on very specific collection parameters. Now that I am wearing this hat over here in the web archiving program, we're not thinking about the content, we're thinking about what circumstances can we set up technologically to do the long-term preservation and care of the collections. Behind you.
I am right behind you. I'm sorry. In the situation like with the, what was it, Pets Deserve Privacy, or other scripts that can really only be found through the archive, what is that, like, how does that interact with like performance rights of a piece?
That is a really great question. So we have so our Office of the General Counsel has set up extremely robust permission policies for us to even crawl a website to begin with. So we have what's called a permissions-based model. There are other organizations and other national libraries out in the world that may do an opt-in, opt-out model. Like they'll crawl it, and then if someone doesn't want the content archived, they say, please take it down. But at the Library of Congress, we don't do that. We get permission for certain types of content first, and then crawl it, and then there's a secondary permission, depending on what the content is, to display the item publicly on loc.gov. There are cases where we receive permission to crawl, to copy the content, but it's only viewable if you're on site at the Library of Congress, whether you're on a computer in a reading room or if you're connected through the library's Wi-Fi, so you at that moment have an IP address that's specific to the library. And now, as for the performance rights, that is outside of what I'm able to cover, hashtag not a lawyer. So, so I encourage anybody who is interested in performing works to work with their best practices that they know of from that area.
I have a second question if no one else has a question. Is that okay? Go ahead. Okay, I have a second question. How often are websites captured? Like, how do you decide how often to capture what?
So the web archiving section does not make those decisions unless it impacts the quality of the capture. The subject experts who select these websites are the ones who make that determination. For example, and it also depends on what is available from our contractor at the time. For example, there are websites that are called weekly. There are some that are called monthly. There are some that are called quarterly. There are some that are crawled once. And many years ago, when the library had a different vendor for our large at-scale crawling, there was an option to do yearly. So it really depends. Each of those frequencies has a different technological depth that it can get to. So if a website is deep, if you imagine when you're looking at the menu of a website and you see lots and lots of pages when you hover over a menu, or you see that the website name gets longer and longer and longer and longer because there are lots of slashes, that means it's a deep website. It can also be a wide website. So for that, sometimes less frequent is better because the crawler has more time to hang out. And sometimes weekly is enough. PDF files, for example, just getting it once works great. So it all depends.
Hey there, thanks. That was great. Where do you put 5.6 petabytes, and how much physical space does that take up?
I can't speak to the physical space, but we have a lot of cold storage, meaning servers that we do not access frequently at all. So when it comes to digital preservation, best practices are that you have multiple copies on multiple servers, this as backups of backups of backups. So we have lots of copies of those, and also it's not just the archived websites that make up the petabytes, it's also the files themselves that provide information about the web archives. So the file that is created by the crawler includes not only the website copy, but also files that describe the content.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. I think we have time for one more question. We got one right up here.
Can you talk a little bit about the collection development policy and how, like, who creates that and what kind of work goes into that? And also, is it available online for us to read?
Yeah. So those kinds of documents are available online. I don't want to be awkward and search for it on my phone in front, but I can help you do that afterwards. So we have a collection development officer and a collection development office, and also each of the custodial divisions that comprise the subject experts who make these decisions also write policy statements. So for example, back when I worked in the music division, I made sure that web archives were incorporated into the collection policy. This way we can say when we're archiving dance that we include the dance creators of our special collections in the Performing Arts Web Archive. So laying it out in the collection development policy. You sound like you're a librarian or an archivist, yeah. So the policies are public and you can view them online, and we also have supplemental guidelines regarding social media. So it is all there. Also, there's an organization called the International Internet Preservation Consortium. The Library of Congress is a founding member, and they have an amazing page on their website. It's netpreserve.org. And they have a whole list of collection development policies of national libraries around the world, and whether those policies are strictly about web archives or ones that incorporate web archives into a broader scope. Yeah. Thank you so much for nerding out with me. You guys are great.